Welcome to the Krusty Fox, and a brand new installment of Sex and the Shitty. After cartwheeling through the minefield of sexual orientation last time, this episode sees Carrie and the gang belly flop into the choppy waters of race relations. Don't forget to sink a like if this video floats your boat, subscribe for a steady stream of new content every week, and keep your head above water until the very end for last week's top comment and this week's question. We begin this latest chapter in the lives of New York's most problematic pals at dinner. Charlotte confesses that her newest Prince Charming nominee, Brad, is a bad kisser, having gone at her face like a bulldog on a dropped ham. They're interrupted by the restaurant's head chef and owner, Adina, a former food critic colleague of Carrie's. Further proving that the fictional New York star just hires anybody who owns a keyboard, Adina's creative choice of name for her fusion restaurant is Fusion.
Groundbreaking.
Adina introduces the group to her music label executive brother, Siobhan, and Samantha puts the Flash to shame with the speed at which she hands him her business card. He recognizes her from an industry event in honor of an early career Jennifer Lopez, a party thrown with all the verve that late career Jennifer Lopez has for throwing her co-performers under the bus. Now, before we get to what happens next, a theory. In scriptwriting, Hank Azaria first coined the term idiot ball, an unflattering mechanic in long-running series. Basically, at least one protagonist has to step noticeably out of character to advance the plot. Like the cast of Friends remembering that black people exist, or the cast of The Big Bang Theory abruptly becoming funny. Sex and the City seems to be one of the only shows I've ever seen to accidentally employ the opposite technique. Someone each week has to be left holding the normal ball. Otherwise, we might as well be watching a Real Housewives reunion that Andy Cohen pumped Joker gas into. This week's holder appears to be Charlotte, who cautions Samantha against her casual appropriation of African American Vernacular English, or AAVE. How do I know she's got the normal ball this time? Because if Charlotte was born 50 years earlier, she'd almost certainly have had to explain to house guests why all of her pillowcases had eye holes. The next day, Stanford drags Carrie down to a furniture showroom to objectify what she classily labels
"Some lowly craftsman, pathetic,"
featured in the New York Times. The craftsman in question turns out to be none other than Aiden Shaw, who we should all take turns screaming at through the screen in an effort to get him to run. Instantly blind, Carrie shoves Stanford out of the way and into the path of designer Marty. Marty, she informs us, is classic gay, perhaps in an effort to distinguish how he tastes from new gay, cherry gay, and gay zero, which I think is a vitamin D deficiency. Carrie's saved from having to manufacture her own introduction when Aiden's dog Pete, who she'll spend a not inconsiderable amount of time plotting to kill over the next couple of years, makes a randy beeline for her leg. Aiden tries to distract Carrie DeVille from the fresh lipstick stain on her dress with some intermediary flirting. Swan diving immediately off the deep end, she lies about why she's there and impulsively buys an armchair that looks like it just featured in an episode of Hoarders.
I'll take it.
When she clocks its $3,800 price tag, she also claims to be a designer in an effort to secure a discount. Hilariously, she's crestfallen to discover that batting her eyelashes only knocked $1,300 off the price. But in fairness, that does mean she's appreciated in value since that French guy tried to pay for her services in season 1. Sacre bleu! We then get a C-plot with Miranda that there really isn't much point going into. Suffice to say that she yet again devalues Steve's admittedly immature dreams, this time involving basketball and patronisingly eos all over his enthusiasm. Steve hoovers up her eventual bare minimum effort like a low-capacity Roomba, and as the plot necessitates, forgets her selfish, emotionally unavailable behaviour by the next episode. Back in the latest version of reality, she's looking to fashion for herself, Carrie sits on the steps of her apartment after dinner with Aiden. She tries to engineer a first date kiss, and deciding the way to this man's heart might be in a amuse-bouche of honesty, admits that she isn't really a designer after all. She then immediately lies again about how much she smokes, despite single-handedly keeping Marlboro in business since at least the early 80s. After an aborted kiss, Aiden declares,
"I can taste that cigarette."
Which, personal preference aside, is a bit of a dick move, but at least it's actually honest. Whereas most people would brush off this difference of opinion and move on, Carrie instead chooses violence. Having made fun of Brad the bad kisser, she now finds herself on his side of the fence. And to say she isn't a fan of the scenery there would be an understatement. Now she rails against those who can't look past the odd flaw, flying in the face of her own legendary inability to look past anything ever. Thus, she decides that this week's headline is, in relationships, what are the deal breakers? Stanford soon encounters a deal breaker of his own with Gay Zero Marty when he discovers that the route to his bed is through a sea of dolls that would make Annabelle piss her pants. Unlike his bestie, Stanny's more of an in for a penny, in for a pounding kind of guy. And so he gamely relocates Marty's collection so that their dead, glassy eyes can watch him perform the reverse bazooka. Back at Fusion, Samantha takes a break from dining on Siobhan to dine with him instead. Adina pops up and, out of his earshot, shares a few choice words with Ms. Jones.
I'm sure you're a very nice person, but you're white.
The chef's special for the evening turns out to be racial segregation, as Adina takes exception to the sheer caucasity of Sam dating her brother. Samantha goes on a mild rant about it with the other ladies over coffee, where there's a grim little undercurrent to Charlotte's insistence that race is an unconquerable relationship frontier. Like she's only ever seconds away from hijacking a city bus and trying to rearrange the passengers using a nude eyeshadow palette as a reference. Having now gone the whole episode with no validation whatsoever, Carrie falls back on reliable yes man Stanford over cocktails. Between them, they agree a pact. Stanny will stick it out with Marty's dolls, at least until one of them chases him out onto the street with a knife. And Carrie will quit the smokes until she sees what Aiden's deal is. This, in spite of both of them having the willpower and critical thinking skills of an overstimulated Bichon Frise. Out clubbing with Siobhan, Samantha bumps into Adina, who unsurprisingly has not changed her outlook on mixed-race relationships or her creepy interest in her brother's sex life in the preceding 24 hours. A heated argument erupts between the two women, which ends in the kind of hair-pulling frenzy rarely seen outside of small-town drag cabarets. Sam gives in when she realises that Siobhan's on Adina's side. And good luck to his future wife, who might be the first woman in history who has to race her sister-in-law to the bridal suite on her wedding night. Carrie ends up spending a jittery day with Aiden, regretting every crappy decision that led her there. Eventually, they wind up in a restaurant, where she's clearly one crossed word from breaking off the stem of her cocktail glass and visiting her nicotine withdrawal on every person within swinging distance. When Aiden threatens to extend the date yet further with dessert, she tells another lie about an impending deadline and runs out of the place like the main course was a wheel of cheese with a side of vindaloo. Outside, Aiden finds her squatting over a puddle with half a wet cigarette in her mouth and proves his nice guy credentials by not assuming that she's sandblasting the sidewalk. I wish I could tell you that this is the lowest Carrie's willing to sink, but just like the career of Sam Smith, the one certainty is that there's always worse to come. Once more, neck-deep in dolls at Marionette Marty's place, Stanford attempts to bypass the usual bedtime routine by jumping his bones midway through. Ignoring the fact that he's 3 inches, or 1 Stanford, away from an audience of expressionless porcelain witnesses, he almost succeeds. That is, until a terrifying approximation of Mary Queen of Scots gets kicked onto the floor. Not for the first time, she loses her head, and Stanford permanently loses his access to Marty's man cannon. Back at her apartment, Carrie tips her remaining death sticks down the toilet and reveals that she's trying to quit for real to avoid breaking up with Aiden. She even slaps on a nicotine patch to help her efforts. If only they made one of those to sate her lust for Big's off-white splattering ram. And so we reach last week's top comment. I asked whether you ever had or ever would drag up, and Commander L Bell is up for the challenge. But only if someone brings along a length of industrial tubing to mash down their tiggle biddies. And if that happens to be your kink, awesome, 2 for 1. This week's question is, have you ever experienced what you considered to be a bad kisser, and if so, how bad was it? Answers in the comments below please, and the best will slobber all over next week's video. Either way, thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and remember, if you can't be good, be crusty.